Hi, Danielle. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. What about you?
I'm doing pretty well too. This is Danielle Reynolds. She is a designer and developer. I have one of our games here, Herstory, and she also is a host of Game Design Unboxed, Inspiration to Publication, another podcast too. So, welcome, Danielle. Happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry we couldn't meet up at Gamma. As you saw, I was running around like a crazy person.
Yeah, yeah. Did you end up having a good show?
I did, but I literally played one game, like only one
Oh,
published game. I played a ton of my prototypes while pitching them, but yeah, it was busy, but that tends to be conventions for me. It's always hard to catch me then.
yeah. Well, did that lead to a new job then, or are you? Yeah.
So, yes and no. Like, it wasn't
Okay.
because of Gamma. I actually got a few other offers, but I
Hmm.
ultimately decided to go with Wise Wizard Games. I am going to
Oh,
be a project manager for them. So it's super exciting. I'll be doing some development work, some art direction, and like working with manufacturers and stuff. So, kind of just taking the prototype that other designers or internally we come up with and just kind of getting it that last bit of the way to make it look like a real game. So, yeah, I'm very excited.
oh, that's awesome. That means that you're probably going to be working on a game that we can't talk about, but I'm excited about.
Oh,
That well, I can mention later. But
okay.
yeah, yeah. It was one I got to play there at Gamma Expo, and I was excited to see signed there. So anyway,
Okay, then I know what
yep,
game this is. Yeah, I know what game
yeah,
it is. That's so funny.
yeah,
Okay, well, cool. That's
yeah.
hilarious that we both know the same stuff. But yeah, I'm super psyched to be starting. I'm actually going to be starting my first week. We'll be at Origins Game Fair. I'll
Oh,
be demoing at their booth. So, like, it's a good way to start your work week is just let's play a bunch of games at a convention that I love. I am sad that it's not during Pride though, because normally Origins used to fall the same time as Pride in Columbus. But sadly, they moved it, which makes me bummed out. But whatever.
yeah. They didn't have much choice about the change. It's just how it is. Um, so you're going to be involved in all different sorts. Did you do some of that at I'm going to say it wrong, Underdog before,
At
or
Underdog Games.
yeah, did
So yeah, I
okay,
did game design, development, a little art direction, like with our internal team,
yeah,
because we have an amazing graphic designer and illustrator on our team. And then, yeah, I'm the one who always specs all of our games. So I like write up what
okay,
the game is going to look like at the end because we used to work in manufacturing. So it's kind of like a skill set that I thankfully have
mhm,
not lost, even though I'm getting a little rusty because I don't use it as much.
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So um, as you approach design yourself, because you have several games that you have both published and some that are in the pipeline that you're talking about, and if you want to talk about any of those, that'd be great too. But
Sure.
I understand. But what do you value in design work?
Oof. What do I value? Like as
Yeah,
far
yeah. Personal
as
values, like what's important to you?
okay. I guess what's important to me is that the game is fun,
Mm,
clearly. A lot of my designs are party games. So with party games, it's like creating a game that will cause like memorable experiences.
hmm
So that's more what's important to me when I design a party game is like, hey, here's this game. It's not a lot of rules. It's pretty easy to get into, and
hmm
that it can play with like a larger amount of players. And it's just going to like cause discussion or laughter or whatever that is. Like the social interaction is what really matters to me in that kind of game. But then, like, I love making abstract games, like two-player abstract games, which is a very different vibe. You're not typically like laughing. You're more just incredibly intensely like zoning in and just trying to like think turns and turns and turns ahead. And so with like an abstract game, especially like a two-player one, I don't want it to be something that's solvable. I want it to be like there are so many potential options you could be thinking about, but it's
mm,
because there's so many, it's hard for you to plan out the future. And so it can put like a newer player and like a pro chess player or something on equal footing. So like that's important to me. But then with like a light strategy game, which is probably like the other thing that I designed the most of, is making it accessible. I want most of my games to be able to be played by my mom.
mm,
And so she gets a lot of anxiety out of like learning new things or rules or stumbling
mm,
on things. She never wants to feel dumb, similar to myself. Like I actually don't like trivia games for that reason because I don't like feeling dumb for not knowing some random fact that honestly it doesn't make sense why I don't know it or why it
uh-huh.
matters. So like making games that are accessible from the rules. So like making a good rule book. I feel like a lot of people have really crappy rule books. So I try really hard to make my rule books good between blind playtesting and just like reiterating. And like I actually do like kind of the block out wireframe of it. And then I send it over to graphic designers and illustrators. So that
Mhm.
way, like from my design perspective, I can like use my rusty graphic design degree to try to make that a little easier. But as far as like the design itself, I want it to be simple rules, but like interesting choices. Like I really love the game Tiny Towns because it's like, okay, like every time you're getting a color block, you're choosing a block that you need, but also you're kind of looking at the other players and trying to figure out like what they're going to get stuck with. But it's really just one thing you're doing. Or in Herstory, you're doing one of three things. The turns are very
Mhm.
snappy, they're quick, and most of the strategy comes from the cards that you collect and the powers that they have and how they combo together. But it's like someone who doesn't see that, they might just be like, oh, it's just like a set collection game. But you know, like getting exact is going to give you some extra points. So I kind of like hiding the strategy inside the game where it's just like the rules are super simple, but
Mhm.
the strategy is kind of what makes it. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my examples.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, so related, I'm gonna go back to one thing then, because I was like, oh, your Watch Mojo game. Um,
Yeah.
so you said you don't like uh, uh, I just lost the word. When you have to know a bunch of information and do those types of games.
That one is
Yeah,
okay.
tell
So
me.
that's an interesting, different kind of thing that happened. So, yes, that one is very pop culture heavy.
Yeah.
You don't actually, it helps if you know some of it for sure. But honestly, I've had people that know nothing about pop culture win that game
Oh, okay.
because it is just you're creating a list of like 1 to 10. And it was at a previous job, we had a publisher. It was Flat River Group when they decided that they were going to like do publishing. They were working with the like Watch Mojo people to create a game. And so I got tasked with creating like a mechanic that made sense and like worked with their top 10 lists. And so like I created a game around that. And the idea being like everyone's going to submit theirs. There's one person who's ranking and they'll take the cards that people submitted. And there's the Watch Mojo lady who is, if depending on player count, there's like empty card slots. You just grab random from the deck and the
Mm,
deck actually can win. So Watch Mojo lady can actually win, which is
okay.
hilarious through play testing. I had to adjust it because it used to be like problematic how much it would win. But yeah, so basically the person's going to take all the cards, they're going to like look and discuss, and then they're going to rank it out and stuff and put like 1 through 10. Now, like first, the person who played that card is going to get 3 points, and then second gets 2 points, third gets 1 point, and then you get like a negative point for the 10. Now, I left before they finished all of it. They actually adjust a little bit because you used to be able to score even more points like going in, which I kind of like, I get for simplicity reasons why they adjusted it. But also part of me kind of didn't like that because a few people don't even like put out all 10 cards. They're like, all that really matters is the top and the bottom, which, I mean, it's true, but also had they not scaled that back down, yeah.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that's what happened there. So it was a situation where almost every one of my published games actually came from a publisher going, hey, I need this kind of game. And me being like, okay, so like here's the design restraints, like this is the price point, this is the size box, this is the kind of game they want. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at Gen Con last summer, people were like, "Did you hear about the eBay game? It's free. You
Yep.
just have to go show them your eBay account and so forth." I didn't realize that was your game until I was getting
Oh my
ready for
God.
this.
That is still probably my favorite story ever.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
What?
so yeah, I'll tell you the story. And it was funny because at Gamma, I actually got to see all the eBay guys. So I gave them hugs and stuff. They're like, hey. And so basically, if they decide to make a game in the future, I'll most likely be the one doing it because I still have great rapport with them. But what happened was at Gen Con, not last year where the game released, but the previous year, I went to the airport after the convention, was really hungry, looking for a place to eat. And there was a kind of seat yourself situation.
Mhm.
And I saw this old couple who looked like they were about to wrap up, and I needed a seat. So I asked if I could kind of loiter. But then the guy who was sitting next to the old couple was just like, you can sit here because it was a 4 person table and he was one person. And so we
Mm.
sat across from each other diagonal because it was like during COVID time. So everyone was like scared to be next to each other. And yeah, and so we start talking, I order food. He's got an eBay shirt on. And so I like asked him, I was like, oh, hey, like it was your first time at Gen Con as eBay and stuff. And I like went over to your booth, checked it out. It was really cool. And he was just like, oh, you knew why we were there? I was like, well, yeah, because I mean, games end up on eBay constantly. whether they're selling it because it's out of print or because it makes money, totally made sense to me. So we talked a little bit. He asked me if I got any of their like trading cards or like promotional items that were at their booth. And I was just like, nope. What? And he explained to me that eBay Collectibles goes around to these different conventions and he's on that team. And they always give out something that's an exclusive to whatever convention. So if it's like a shoe show, you might get like a shoelace or something or a sock that's eBay branded. So yeah, they go to like different shows. Like they made like a comic book for like a special eBay Marvel comic book cover for like, I think New York Comic Con. I don't know, or maybe it was San Diego Comic Con.
Sure,
but yeah,
sure,
so they make something for every show. And so I immediately was like, well, hey, I am actually a game designer. I work for a game manufacturing company. And at that company, we also have like illustrators, graphic designers. And it's like, basically we can start from me making the design up until printing it and sending it away. And I was like, you could make it a Gen Con exclusive. And then knowing people, they'll take a bunch and then put it back on eBay. And so it'll just cycle through the system, which I was completely accurate because the next year that exact thing happened. So I ended up coming with a bunch of different pitches, and the pitch that they chose as far as the game mechanics went was emulating how eBay worked. So I don't know if you played the game, but basically you can like find like, so there's different like collectibles or whatever that you can put on there. You have like your trading cards, your plushies, your board games, let's see, statues, and comic books.
Okay.
One more. So you can find those in like grandma's closet or the attic, or you could go to like a yard sale and you pay a little bit of money in order to get those. And so you like kind of boost those up, and eventually you go to eBay, you sell them, and like eventually it'll just keep costing more and more, or you'll get more and more money from it. But it does, like, once it hits the top, it like shoots back down kind of thing, because too much on eBay devalues it. And then that's kind of like how you generate money. There's only one thing you can do on your turn. So you can only like raid grandma's closet, sell things to eBay, or click the buy it now button, which people don't know, like a lot of times on eBay, there's a buy it now button. So it's like, if you pay this price, you get this. Or you can do the whole auctioning thing of like going back and forth and hoping you get it. But a lot of times it ends up being more expensive than the buy it now button to begin with. So you have that. And then there's like an auction phase where you reveal simultaneously, and then you will get the cards. And the cards are like set collections. It's just like you're trying to collect kind of Sushi Go style pyramid scoring for each of those different types of things. And also if you collect one of each, you'll get X amount of points. And then you get money. And so like the money ends up being victory points, but it's also your currency. So it's like, it was a cool game. A month before like the game finished, they did change a few of the development things, which actually I home rule this game because all the complaints on BGG are things that they changed last second. And like Jonathan Gilmore was hired on to develop. And so him and I got it to a cool place. And then both of us left the project and they adjusted a few things, which kind of annoyed me. It's actually like, and graphic design wise, they did white on yellow, and that is just a really stupid choice. And so it's funny when I read these comments and I'm like, I agree, it was a dumb choice. It wasn't me, it was a dumb choice. But yeah, it was still just a really cool thing that like me and this guy just met, and then now we're friends. We follow each other on Instagram and stuff, and I get to see him at conventions. And eBay Buy It Now is a game that I made based off of just pitching it in person randomly and then following up.
That's awesome. Well, is there a game that you have struggled with? I mean, that's interesting that both of those games that we just talked about, you didn't get to see to completion. Is there a design element that you struggle with when you are going from start to finish on a game, though?
So yeah, and so with those games, it was a situation where I had done most of the work, and then because the job I currently was working at, like we ended up leaving. They changed a few things, which is kind of just something that happens with a lot of designers too. Even when I've designed games and had it signed, and it's just like some publishers will just take it. They'll have their development team work on it, and then you don't really know what it's going to look like until you get it back. And sometimes it feels incredibly different. Sometimes you're involved the entire way. So it's like a thing that a lot of designers, I feel like, don't talk about enough. And then we also have this thing where a lot of times you're developing a game and you don't even know, like at a certain point, it almost isn't, it's not that game. Like it really is no longer the same game. So it's like, are you a developer? You're a co-designer? Are you the designer? And I've had discussions like that with people before. Cause like I have this game called Cluckle where some people are like, no, you're the designer. And some people are like, well, developer. But it was essentially, I was handed a rubber chicken that shoots a, die out of its butt. And they're like, we want a spelling game. So like I was handed a prop, puts a dice out of its butt and told to make a spelling game. So like, in my opinion, I would be a designer for that. But
Yeah.
then in other people, they're like, yeah, but they came up with the idea of the chicken and a die with it. Yeah. And I'm just like, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like one of those weird things where it's like, yeah, but I did the play testing. I decided what like letters would be in it, how many of them. I came up with the rule set. I did like how many of like each number would be on the die and that it would be numbers versus letters or something else. So it's just like I did all that. I would consider it design. Some
Yeah.
people might consider it development. It's a very interesting thing. But as
Yeah.
far as struggles go, honestly, it's always that last bit of percentage of a game, which is why I like working with developers to help me on that. Cause I feel like you should always have a second set of eyes, at least on a game. You don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, but I might like see this game so much that I just don't even notice anything anymore. And just I'll be blinded to a massive problem spot. And so I think it's always good to like have someone else. And I have like a few go-to friends like Jonathan Gilmore, where I'll be like, hey, can you look at this and make sure it's balanced? Because I'm not a super math heavy designer. Like I can guesstimate the math. Like I was pretty decent when I was younger, but I don't really keep up with it and stuff. And so I'll like pass it off to a developer and be like, hey, can you make sure this looks good? Or like a publishing company. So I'm excited with Wise Wizard games. They're very math focused with all their games, clearly, because deck building, you need that. Where I'm more feeling focused. So it's kind of like we balance each other well. Like with Herstory, Nick Bentley was the math guy. I was like the throw spaghetti and just come up with weird ideas person.
Yeah. So if you had unlimited time for any topic that might be underrepresented in gaming right now, what would you design then? Or have you already designed it and you're just looking for a publisher?
I think I want to continue to make more games with like female characters because there just really aren't a lot. I was on a panel and they talked about how there's more sheep on the covers of board games than there are women, and like clearly Herstory helped put those numbers higher with how many faces we put on the front of that box. But I would like to continue to like explore that. I have a design that I need to get in better shape. That's called like Daughters of Asclepius, which will be another one that it's like you're literally only playing as female characters. And so I want to just continue to kind of do a little bit of that and have like some more weird themes that haven't really been explored. That's more what I'm interested in doing, and just continue to make sure that like the artwork represents a ton of different types of people. Like even in my prototypes, like I have a prototype called Froyo, and it's about like frozen yogurt machine being broken and you trying to fill orders. And, you know, like people may or may not get exactly what they want in the order they want, but they're going to get something. But like the little characters that I drew for it, like I got a guy that has a robotic leg. I have a person in a wheelchair. I have a person that is like super thin, and you just like don't really know, like they look gender queer, like you don't really know what they are. And just like a bunch of different things like that, or like you could point out and be like, oh, that person kind of looks like this person, or like this person has a hijab. Like I want to like have different representation in everything I do and try to push for that in all the games that I have in the future. If there are people involved, if there are animals, well, let's put a bunch of different animals. I don't know.
Cool. So if you could go back in time to 2020 or 2021, what advice would you give yourself? Because it sounds like there's been some changes in how you approach things, but what would you do differently?
It is interesting. Yeah, I have definitely done a lot in the past 2 years, some of which I'm just like, I can't even believe I've done this much in 2 years because I really haven't been in the industry that long. In 2018, I found out this was an industry. In 2019, I started like designing games as a hobby and stuff. So it was just like, and then COVID happened. So like in the past 2 years, probably
Or
would have put more, I would have said no more, honestly. How
yeah.
I got into what I'm doing now and how I'm a part of so many different organizations is from constantly saying yes. And I was burning myself out in my initial job in the industry, very much took advantage of me in my time. Like I was working 60-hour weeks to the point where I literally had a nightmare, punched my lamp right next to me into the wall and broke my Apple Watch from stress of that job and
Oh,
stuff. And
wow.
so
Yeah.
it was not healthy. And so putting more healthy boundaries in the beginning would have been good. Like I've gotten a lot better at saying, sorry, I can't do this. But what I typically do is say, no, but have you met this person? And I do kind of an introduction and like switch over. I should have done that more in the beginning, and I should have like set harder boundaries in my initial job. It definitely has gotten better with future jobs, but my initial job in the industry was very much like stressful.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I mean, related to that, like, do you feel that that was something that if you had, and we don't have to get into who that was working for or anything like that, but like, do you feel like if you had set better boundaries, that would have been something that you still would have been encouraged the way you are? Because you, like you said, you've been very very productive over the last couple of years. Or do you think that output that you've done over the last couple of years is in some ways related to how much you were working? Like what
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, just because that's a weird thing, right? Of like, hey, I was super productive, but I should have set better boundaries. Um, like would you just rather have less output from the last couple of years? Would that be okay with you in general? Or I know it's not a precise question, and I get that. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you could have focused on a single project, do you think that would have maybe been a better use of your time? Let's ask that question.
So no, because I actually enjoy bouncing between a ton of different projects. It
Yeah.
gives me a chance to like put one kind of on a break if I'm stuck on it versus like hitting my head against a wall. I've always been better at working at multiple things at one time.
Mm,
Like when I was at Gamma, I had 20 games with me that I was pitching,
yeah.
all very different, have different mechanics.
Yeah.
In the way of like saying no, and in that particular instance, I wasn't just doing game design. I was doing
Mm,
project management. I was doing a lot of different things, and it was like working two jobs.
mm, mhm.
So had I put in the like more no's or like, hey, you're pushing me too hard, honestly, though, with that company, they probably would have just fired me early.
Mm.
So
So it's
that's
just
not a great example.
just an unhealthy work environment. Yeah.
It was an unhealthy work
Yeah.
environment, but I think in general, yeah, like taking a time to step away from design and like doing other things like spending time with friends, or in my case, I go rock climbing or hiking,
Mhm.
like de-stressing in those ways are things that I've like learned through time, that you can't just be solely focused because you are doing good things and you are doing a lot of things and things are like moving, because you definitely have this like this almost feeling of like, I need to feed the fire, like it's going, like I got to keep burning higher and higher and higher, but eventually you're gonna
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah.
So to change directions completely, I had thrown this one in there. If you could meet anybody from Herstory throughout history, who would that person be and why?
Oh no, that's hard. I feel like I have to say Hedy Lamar because it's now a running joke that she's my bae, to the
Okay.
point where she's actually on the side of the box now.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you like grab it and you start flipping, you're gonna see her on one of the sides.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
What makes her
probably
interesting
her.
for those who aren't familiar with her?
So she's interesting because, well, oh my God. So we wouldn't have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth without her technology.
Mhm.
So first off, like she is just an incredibly intelligent individual. She
Mhm.
also is an actress and is completely stunning. And just like she is what you would say like in those movies where it's like this gorgeous woman who has it all, who's like smart and like kind and fun and just like does all these things, and I had no idea she existed until I started working on this game, and I like immediately was like, ooh, who dat? And then I started like looking into it, and yeah, so she's pretty cool in that way because like anyone who uses a smartphone, we wouldn't really have most of that technology without her. So, highly recommend reading her card. And if you want to learn more, just Googling her.
Fantastic. Thanks. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many different people, and that's what one of the things I liked about the game is that like it's a game that prompts you to look for more information, and
Mm-hmm.
I like things that do that because there's always things we don't know. So, um, let's go back to Stargazers, one of your unpublished games. I
Sure.
asked this because it looked interesting to me. Tell me about that game if you're up for it.
Yeah. So that's a prototype game that is Oh gosh. Somewhat toyetic. It's got a great table presence, which is probably why you like saw a picture and we're like, ooh, what's that?
Hmm.
Because it is made up of those like fun little pegboards that as kids we would like make shapes using rubber bands. So I
Hmm.
like saw those and I was like, ooh, this could be part of a game. And I was a big fan of constellations when I was little and stuff. Like my dad would get me one of those little mappy things and a telescope, and I'd like look and try to find them. And so the idea of the game is you're rolling dice. The dice are going to tell you what you're collecting, whether it be stars or different colored rubber bands, which just relate to like how stretchy, how big they are. So what you're doing is you're collecting those things, you're placing stars, and you're trying to build out the constellation. So I actually created constellations that very closely resemble the constellations you would see in the sky. And so, if you're able to successfully build them with the correct spacing, and a lot of people joke when they play test that it feels like physical therapy because you're like counting the little dots, trying to make sure that everything's spaced correctly, and like pulling the little rubber bands. But if you do successfully create like Leo, you will then take the card, and like if you're the first to get there, you will get more points than the second or third person to get to it. And you're always going to lay out 9 potential constellations per game. And each of those are going to have like 3 cards kind of stacked on top of each other with different point values. And the game ends when someone completes 4 cards. So it's like you want to be efficient in the way that you're reusing stars because you always remove the rubber bands, but you can continue to always add stars because, you know, once a star is up in the sky, you see it, it's not disappearing, but you're the one like drawing the lines out, or in that case, stretching the lines out. So yeah, it's a really cute game. It's one of those ones that a lot of publishers are like, oh, this is interesting, but I don't know about rubber bands. But now Think Fun has a rubber band game, so now publishers are looking at it again and they're like, well, actually, and I was like, all I needed was one rubber band game to come out to make people believe in this. But yeah, so it's cool. It's a cute concept that I hope someday will be published. If not, well, I have a really cute looking game or prototype.
Yeah, I mean, in part, both the look and the fact that it was rubber bands, and I like sometimes I like the break of a kinetic thing in a game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Similar to what you're saying, I like how a game can and just change your focus when it has a kinetic element to it.
Yep.
Um, and did you see that when you play tested with people? It sounds like a little bit that they would kind of just get into that motion of connecting the things.
Yeah, it was very serene, is what people would say. They're like, I'm just really relaxed right now. And I was like, oh, well, that's good.
That,
It's or we've been using the like the name cozy game. It's a very cozy game. And it's just like very simplistic and cute, and it photographs really well. People like taking pictures.
that's awesome. Well, anything else that you would want to talk about? Any design advice you want to give people, or manufacturing advice, or just for people that might want to get into the industry? Because you sounds like you've moved along very quickly in your career within board games and tabletop games. Anything related to any of that that you'd like to share?
Um, sure. Gosh, now I gotta think of it. But in general, like for a designer, if you have an idea, make sure to write it out and try to prototype it as quickly as possible, because in the nicest way of saying, an idea doesn't mean anything unless you like test it, and you can't test it unless you make it. So that's always kind of my first advice, is just like do it. Similar to the Nike commercial, just do it. And then like find other designers, find game enthusiasts to test with, and like get each other's feedback, because I know even just from watching how other people prototype and play test, it's helped me a ton.
Mm.
And make sure that you keep track of notes of like everything people say, and really observe what the players are doing when they're interacting with your game, because a lot of times they're not going to be able to verbalize when something annoyed them or frustrated them or made them happy, but like you can jot that down from watching what they do
Mm.
in a
Mm.
playtest, which of course is hard when you do I do a lot of digital playtesting, so it's like that becomes a little more difficult, but in person it's a good thing to like note how people are responding physically to the game. And as far as like from a manufacturing standpoint, thinking about what you want the game to look like at the end and like how much things are going to cost is a great way to design,
Mm.
because a lot of times a publisher will look at a game and be like, that's going to cost too much, and they're not even going to spend time really playing it. They're just going to look at it and be like, no, there's like way too many wooden
Mm.
bits or something. And so just like try to keep the components down, like don't go crazy unless like it absolutely is necessary. Try to like use dual use cards or switch things to like cheaper components, or at least have it be like, hey, here's the game, but here's alternatives if you want to make it cheaper. Because a lot of times the nice thing is a lot of publishers do go on Kickstarter and they want those stretch goals. So it's like showing them a nicer version is great, but like also show them or tell them how they can make it cheaper. Because money unfortunately makes the world go round when it comes to a lot of these publishers.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
related to like bespoke components, I remember recently seeing two really cool looking games that had amazing table presence, but they had very unique components that would have to like be machined and
Mm-hmm.
new dies made for them. And I think more than anything, those components is what kept those games from having to further looks by publishers. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that you bring that up related to manufacturing, because I think sometimes people get so attached to this could be so cool
Mm-hmm.
that they forget that other part. Well, depending on their goals, right? They might just want to
Yeah.
make it for their family and friends, but cool.
Yeah. Also, don't be super precious with your design. Just know that most likely, if you sign on with a publisher, they're probably going to change the art, change the theme, change some mechanics, either for the better or the worst. And you're
Mhm.
just going to have to be okay with it and know that your name is associated with it. So when you sign on with a publisher, make sure it's someone you trust
Mhm.
and that you
Mhm.
respect. Ask around if you know anyone that
Mhm.
has signed games previously. I think that's a great way to do it. I've noticed through being in the industry longer, there is a lot of kind of like hidden, I don't know, secrets about certain people that only come up when you get to know more and more people and you're networking and you're like going out to drinks, because it's not something that's public, because maybe you're a newer designer that got screwed over, but it's like because you're newer, you don't want to like stir the pot. And so people
Mhm.
may or may not work with you. So it's one of those things where like do your homework before signing any contracts, show the contract around to people that you trust just so you aren't missing out on something, because
Mhm.
or get a lawyer. All of those are really good. Um, but yeah, so just like be open to changes and suggestions, but also know that like once you sign away something, it's no longer really yours.
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
just have to be okay with it. Otherwise, self-publish. That is a track you can take. And
Yeah.
I admire people that want to take it. I personally tried when I first got into like gaming in like 2019 to run a Kickstarter, and I was dumb. I should have never done it. I'm so much better at making other people succeed. Like I will steer a ship. I will not own the ship.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you got to get going here soon. So uh, thanks, Danielle. I really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to what you are going to do with Wise Wizard and also your own designs, because it sounds like there's more coming soon.
Oh yeah, actually, I can mention two of them that are coming before we end, if that's cool. The Underdog Games, I have two games that are coming out. One is a co-design for little kiddos. It's a little scavenger hunt, which is going to be really cute, animal themed, and then a different animal themed game, which is a deduction party game called Secret Clue Animals. And they're also going to be in partnership with a really cool partnership that I cannot talk about, an IP that people are going to really love. But in general, highly recommend checking them out. If you got a little kid and you want to do a scavenger hunt, that one's really cute. Otherwise, the other one is made for like families or friends. It's kind of a mix of like a code names meets Similo meets concept kind of game, where basically you have a grid of 9 cards and you're trying to figure out, one person is the clue giver. They can't talk. They have a grid and shows like 1, 2, 3, like the animals they need to get the group to guess in that particular order. And they're just playing other animal cards out in like the similar, dissimilar spots. But it's really cute to kind of see how people interact with the game. And on the back of every card is information about each animal. And we chose very obscure animals beyond
Mm-hmm.
just the ones that you would normally know, similar to Herstory, because we want people to learn and engage in the game.
Very cool. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.